A few months ago, I started working for an influencer. I stumbled on Grace Adams' Instagram account quite by accident. She was a fairly new influencer who already had over 380,000 followers. She was a yoga master, vegan, human rights activist, and she'd recently been posting about issues she had finding a new film crew. Her feed showed many of the biggest celebrities and professionals currently in the movie-making business. This was exactly what an aspiring movie maker like me needed. I sent her a message detailing my background and attached some of my work. I wasn't really expecting an answer, but within a week, I received a response. She said she loved my work and was super interested in meeting to discuss a potential business proposition. I drove up to the gates of her sprawling mansion at the prearranged time. Her property was in an affluent suburb well outside the city. The drive up to the house was picturesque, pulled right out of any of one of Hollywood's golden age of glamour movies. Grace was in front of the house waiting for me, backlit by the sunshine but casual, like I was completely unexpected. She was wearing designer wear from head to toe, looking like a model from the glossy pages of a magazine. Man, did this woman know how to set a scene. We wandered the extensive yards of the house just chatting. In a sad tone, she told me how she had fired her last cameraman, implying that they had committed some criminal act against her, but never coming out right and saying it. She then suggested that I'd be perfect for the job. She advised that I'd record and edit all of her content. She emphasized how much my business would benefit from the association with her brand, how she'd introduce me to all the high rollers that she knew in the movie-making industry. I was stunned at the big names she was dropping so nonchalantly. Grace then added that this arrangement would be unpaid. At first, I was shocked that she expected me to work for free, but realizing the clout she had on her Instagram channel, the caliber of people that she knew, I didn't hesitate to agree. After all, she would only need me for filming for a few hours a week, and I could take as much time as I needed for the editing. The next 2 months were a dream. We shot a lot of stuff, mostly vegan cooking tutorials and yoga instructions. But there was also the occasional product review or motivational dialogue to mix things up. Grace was so professional, directing everything perfectly and needing only a few retakes for the shoots. It made editing a breeze. One day she called with a strategy for the next shoot. This content, she said, would be a little different. She wanted me to follow her around the streets of the city. She would be giving money to any homeless people she could find, and we'd record their reactions. I didn't like this. It felt like taking advantage of other people's desperate situations for our own gain. But I did not voice my objections. I'd seen this on her channel and others before, and knew it gained a lot of traction. So there we were, on the grimy streets of the city. She had dressed down a little for the adventure, and was burning bright with excitement. The first homeless person we saw was a middle-aged man. His sign said he had not eaten in 3 days, and that he had suffered from mental illness. She confidently walked over to him and explained that she was a famous influencer, and asked if he'd give consent for us to record and upload their interaction. He did. So good so far. You could see she had done this before. Grace then began to ask some very personal questions about his illness and his life before being homeless. He became increasingly uncomfortable and was not very willing to answer. That's when she produced a $100 note from her pocket. She put the note in the cup he had before him and smiled. He mummed a quiet thank you. She followed up with rapid questions in succession. How would this money change his life? What food would he be buying, as it was his first meal in 3 days? Would his priority be buying life-saving medication, or would it be nourishment? Looking harassed and cornered, he clammed up. That was not what she wanted. She became enraged. She began screaming at this poor guy, saying he was ungrateful, useless, and a burden on society. She ripped the $100 note back from the soiled cup, screaming obscenities the whole time. I was utterly shocked at the outburst, having never seen her like this before. It was ugly. I was eventually able to lead her away, giving the man an apologetic backward glance. I made do with whatever usable material we garnered from the experience, and Grace was pleased with the resulting work. I was starting to question how well I knew Grace Adams. A few days later, I received an unexpected call from her. She seemed excited about a new recording she wanted to do that night. She said to grab my night gear and to meet her at the local cemetery. I decided that Grace deserved the benefit of the doubt, that the situation with the homeless man was a one-off. I knew she must have been under enormous pressure. It was right on sunset when I arrived at the cemetery. Grace had not yet arrived, so I started unloading my gear. A full 45 minutes later, it was cold, dark, and I was getting pissed off. I was contemplating packing my stuff back up when she pulled into the parking lot. She jumped out in a flurry of excited activity. As we made our way into the cemetery, she explained that recently other influencers were going viral, posting themselves doing seances. She knew she would get the biggest boost in subscribers if she took this one step further by doing a seance in a cemetery at night on top of an old grave. I told her I did not think this was a great idea. She advised me that she did not care what I thought, and what the hell did I know about what the public wanted to see? She reminded me that she was the one with 380,000 subscribers on her Instagram account. I just kept my mouth shut, realizing that I should be putting an end to our working relationship. I'd do that the minute this fiasco was over. Grace found a suitably aged grave and set up the Ouija board and candles she had brought with her. She sat cross-legged on the grass directly above where the body would be situated. The whole thing gave me chills. She spent the next 10 minutes or so asking inane questions of the Ouija board without a response. Giving up, she laid down on the grave, going on a tirade about how people get sucked into things of the paranormal. This went on for quite some time. It was then that the ground below her started to rumble and shift. She looked dumbfounded. The grass heaved on either side of her. Then a pair of skeletal hands shot out of the ground from either side of her waist. They were darkened with a rotted flesh and dirt. The smell immediately staggered me, but I was somehow still able to continue recording. The hands gripped around Grace's waist and gave a tremendous pull. They grabbed their purchase back into the dark depths of the grave. Grace's body folded in half and disappeared, with several accompanying cracking sounds. I could hear muffled screaming and deep thuds, as if someone was kicking at the dirt walls of the grave. Then all the sounds ceased. The last sight I had of Grace was the indignant pout on her entitled face. It would have been comedic if it was not so horrifying. And that was that. Yoga master, vegan, human rights activist and influencer, Grace Adams was gone. I was in shock. I stood there for a few minutes, still recording. Then I hightailed it out of there. I called the police, who arrived quickly. They checked out the scene and viewed what I had recorded several times. In a very short amount of time, they called in reinforcements and set up a tent over the grave. I was taken to the police station to give a statement. All of my recording equipment was confiscated, and I was forcibly advised to forget what I saw. In the following weeks, several recordings of Grace in a bad light were leaked on her social media accounts. Many people came out saying what a horrible person she was. I'd read somewhere that the house where we'd first met was not hers, but actually belonged to a friend. She used the garden space whenever she had clients to make it look like she was wealthy. None of her clothes and jewellery were ever paid for, but were free samples for her channel. Word had it she cheated everyone she ever met and never spent $1 for the resources she used. The kicker for me was that she didn't even know anyone in the movie business at all. The pictures I had seen on her account with the rich and famous celebrities were fake. Eventually, an official message was uploaded to Grace's Instagram account, apparently from Grace, saying she was sorry and she was booking herself into rehab for substance abuse issues. She asked her subscribers to pray for her recovery and said she needed some time away. No one ever heard from her again. Most believed the pressure had been too much for her and she had just walked away from it all. I knew better. I knew she was dead, but I had been threatened to keep my mouth shut. But all of this was the least of what worried me. What had the police found in that grave? What were they hiding?